Mike and Emily met at a party at a mutual friend's house. Mike is a 30-year-old man of medium height with dark brown hair and green eyes. He is athletic, always neatly dressed. His demeanor is calm and confident. He is charming and friendly. And Emily is a 25-year-old blonde with long wavy hair and blue eyes. She is slender, with a perfect figure and a dazzling smile. Emily always looks stylish and well-groomed. Her sweet appearance and kind nature attract people. Their relationship developed rapidly, and a year later they got married. Despite the age difference, their union was strong and happy. Emily was the perfect wife, caring, loving, and supportive. One morning at breakfast, Mike and Emily had a nice conversation and recalled the events of their wedding. "I still remember that day as if it were yesterday." Mike said, "You're in a white dress, glowing with happiness. I admired you, and I knew that you were my perfect half." Emily answered him smiling, "You were so nervous back then, but it only made you more charming. I knew right away that we would be happy together." A few years passed, and Mike really felt over the moon. They had a cozy home, and every day brought joy and satisfaction. Emily was not only a wonderful wife, but also a great hostess. "Did you cook dinner by yourself again? It's just incredibly delicious, Emily. I know how much you love my cuisine. It's the least I can do for you, darling," Emily said, smiling sweetly at him. However, Mike's life changed when he first met his mother-in-law, Susan. Her figure is curvy and attractive. She is always well-groomed and dresses with elegance. She has a strong, domineering character, but at the same time she can be very charming. She came to their first meeting in a formal suit. Her black hair was neatly styled, and her voice was quiet and authoritative. Emily introduced her mother, and they continued chatting sweetly. "Mike, I've heard so much about you. Emily always talks about you with such love." Mike, a little embarrassed, but very friendly, replied, "Nice to meet you, Susan. Emily talked a lot about you." With each subsequent visit, Mike became more and more attracted to Susan. Her domineering personality and mysterious aura attracted him. He began to notice her beauty, which he had not noticed before. After one evening, after Emily's mother had left, he sat at the table lost in thought. "Why am I reacting to her like this? This is wrong. I have Emily, but every time I see Susan, my heart starts beating faster." He was surprised by his reaction to his mother-in-law. He had never led a wild lifestyle and loved Emily, but he was very attracted to his own mother-in-law, and it was getting harder for him to resist his feelings. Several months passed, and Mike realized that his feelings for Susan were getting stronger. He couldn't help but notice her subtle hints and flirtatious glances. "Mike, can you help me with this report? I know you're great at these things," Susan said with a smile when she visited them once again. "Of course, Susan. Let's see what's in there," Mike said, trying to hide his excitement. Mike's life began to change. He was happy with Emily, but Susan was becoming an increasingly significant figure in his thoughts. He couldn't understand why he was attracted to this woman who was older than him and was the mother of his wife. But one thing he knew for sure: his life wouldn't be the same anymore. A few years later, when Mike and Emily were enjoying family life, the relationship with Susan's mother-in-law became increasingly mysterious. One day, during another visit to Emily's parents, Mike noticed something strange. Mike, Emily, and Susan were sitting at the table enjoying dinner. The conversation was about everyday things, and it seemed that nothing unusual was happening. "Mom, you always make such delicious dishes. You have to teach me your secrets," Emily said, smiling. "Of course, dear. We can have some cooking lessons together. I'm lucky to have a wife and mother-in-law who cook so well. I am the happiest person in the world." I supported them. One day, Mike went to the window, enjoying the view of the street. At that moment, a black Jeep pulled up to the house. The driver, a tall man with broad shoulders, helped Susan out of the car. Mike frowned, trying to figure out who this man was. "Do you know who's giving your mom a ride?" Mike asked in surprise, approaching Emily. "No, I don't know." Mike decided to ask Bill's father-in-law, who was sitting in the living room with a newspaper. "Bill, who gave Susan a lift? Do you know him?" "Oh, that's her boss. She works late, and he sometimes drives her home." "But why don't you pick her up yourself?" "I have my own business, Mike." "Yes, and that's fine. He's just helping her." Susan entered the house with a smile on her face. She looked pleased and even a little excited. Mike couldn't take his eyes off her, noticing her sparkling eyes and a slight smile. "Mom, you're so happy. What happened?" Emily asked her mother. "We submitted all the reports on time, and the boss was pleased. He even gave me a little bonus," Susan replied, smiling. "Congratulations, dear. You deserve it. My father supported me." Mike couldn't understand why everyone was so calm about Susan being driven by someone else's man. That evening, when they returned home, he decided to discuss it with Emily. "Emily, don't you think it's strange that your mom is so close to the boss?" "Mike, she's a grown woman. She knows what she's doing. Dad doesn't mind, and I don't see a problem with that either. But still, it haunts me," Mike said excitedly. "Don't worry, Mom was always responsible. She won't allow herself anything extra." Despite Emily's words, Mike continued to feel anxious. The next day, as he was driving home from work, his thoughts returned to that Jeep and the mysterious man. He decided he had to find out more about Susan and her boss. A week passed, and one evening Mike noticed the same Jeep near their house. He came closer and saw Susan handing the driver something that looked like a box. "What's going on here?" he thought, looking carefully in their direction. The next day, while working in a new position that Susan helped him get, Mike decided to ask her a few questions. "Susan, I wanted to thank you for helping me with the job. But I noticed that you often travel with your boss. Is everything okay?" "Mike, you're so caring. It's all good. We're just colleagues, and he helps me with transportation sometimes. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." "Thank you, Susan." But Mike couldn't shake the feeling that Susan was hiding something. He decided to keep a close eye on her and her boss to find out the truth. It's been a few weeks since Mike started working at the firm where Susan was the chief accountant. He was increasingly disturbed by the strange behavior of Susan and her boss. The atmosphere at work seemed to him increasingly strange and tense. Something is clearly wrong here. All the women in the office behave as if they are afraid of the boss, but they always look happy after talking to him. "We need to figure out what's going on," he thought once again. One morning, when Mike arrived at work earlier than usual, he noticed that the door to Susan's office was ajar. Inside was her boss, Mr. Davis, a tall man with a loud voice and a powerful build. They were discussing something important, and Mike decided to eavesdrop. "Susan, the reports should be ready by tonight. And don't forget about bonuses for new employees," he said loudly. "Of course, everything will be ready. You can rely on me." Mike heard Mr. Davis leave the office and decided to enter. "Susan, can I talk to you for a minute?" he said excitedly. "Of course, Mike. What happened?" "I just wanted to know if everything is okay with my reports. I want to make sure I'm doing everything right." "Don't worry, Mike. You're doing a great job. But if you have any questions, you can always contact me." Despite Susan's calm words, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something was hiding behind their professional relationship. In the evening, he decided to stay at work longer than usual to find out more. When all the staff had already left, Mike crept up to Mr. Davis's office. He heard muffled voices and looked inside. What he saw shocked him to the core. Susan was sitting on the boss's desk, and Mr. Davis was standing in front of her with his trousers down. "I can't believe my eyes. It's impossible," he thought in dismay. Susan noticed Mike and, without showing any embarrassment, turned to him. "Mike, either come in or close the door." Mike quickly closed the door and hurried back to his workplace, his heart pounding wildly. He didn't know how to react to what he saw. "My head was full of thoughts about how to live on. I'm in shock. How could she? How am I supposed to look into her eyes now?" His mind was spinning over what he had just seen. The next day, Mike felt awkward being around Susan. She, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. During his lunch break, Mike decided to talk to one of his colleagues to find out what she thought about the situation in the office. "Jenny, you've been working here a long time, right?" he asked, sitting down next to Jenny's colleague. "Yes, for several years now. Why are you asking?" she replied. "It seems to me that something strange is happening here. Have you ever noticed anything suspicious?" "Mike, this place is full of secrets. But if you want to work here, it's better not to ask unnecessary questions. Just stay away from the boss's office." Mike knew that he would have to find out the truth himself. He decided to have another private conversation with Susan to find out her motives. "Susan, we need to talk. I want to understand what's going on," Mike said, inviting Susan over for coffee. "Of course, Mike. What do you want to talk about?" she replied matter-of-factly. "I saw you with Mr. Davis yesterday. I don't understand what you're doing. What is all this for?" "Mike, it's just a job. Sometimes you have to do what is necessary. You have to understand that nothing comes easy in this world." Mike was amazed at her composure. He didn't know what to think or how to proceed. But one thing was clear. His life at this firm would never be the same again. Mike couldn't calm down after the unpleasant discovery. He felt that he was entangled in a web of lies and intrigues. But one thing he knew for sure. He needed answers. One evening, when the working day was over and the office was empty, Mike decided to stay late to observe what was happening in the company after closing. "Today I have to find out the truth. Susan is not as simple as she seems. And this Mr. Davis. I need to figure out what's really going on." Mike hid in his car in the parking lot, looking forward to the end of the day. Soon, he saw Susan leave the office and head to her car. Mr. Davis was right behind her. They looked like they were discussing something important. "Susan, are you sure we can trust Mike? He's too curious," Mr. Davis was saying softly. "I'll deal with him." "Don't worry," Susan was saying. Mike couldn't hear the whole conversation, but he understood enough to make sure they were hiding something. Suddenly, Susan and Mr. Davis broke up, and Mike decided that now was the time to talk to Susan alone. He got out of the car and walked briskly towards her. "Susan, wait. We need to talk." "Mike, what are you doing here at this hour?" she asked in surprise. "I need to know what's going on. I can no longer work in such an atmosphere without understanding what is really going on." Susan sighed and looked at Mike with an expression that read both fatigue and irritation. "All right, Mike, but not here. Let's drive a little further away, talk in a more private place." They got into their cars and drove to the nearest parking lot, which was in a dark, little visited place. Susan looked serious and determined as she got out of the car. "Susan, what's going on between you and Mr. Davis? And why is everyone in the office acting so strangely?" "Mike, I know how you feel right now, but you have to understand that in this world, nothing is given for nothing. Mr. Davis is an influential man, and I'm doing everything I can to hold my position and secure a future for Emily. But this is wrong. I can't believe you're involved in this. Why didn't you tell me before?" "You know everything, Mike. This business is connected with many shady parties, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices. I didn't want to drag you into this, but now that you know, you have a choice. Either leave or accept the rules of the game." Mike felt his world crumbling. Everything he knew and believed turned out to be a lie. He realized that he was facing a difficult choice. What do I have to do to understand everything to the end? What should I do next? He asked. Mike, I understand that it's hard for you, but if you decide to stay, you'll have to accept all the rules. Otherwise, you might lose everything you have. Mike stood lost in thought. He knew that this conversation had changed his life forever. He had to make a difficult decision. Either leave everything he knew or accept the dark sides of the business and try to survive in this new world for him. All right, Susan. I'll stay. But I want to know everything. I need answers to all my questions. You'll get your answers, Mike, but be prepared for the fact that you might not like them. They returned to the office, and Mike realized that his life would never be the same again. He had to learn all the secrets and decide how to live on in this new, dark world where no one was who they seemed. It's been a few months since Mike made the decision to stay at the company and find out the whole truth. He immersed himself in his work, trying to figure out the intricacies of office intrigues and understand what really lies behind the facade of a successful business. But the more he learned, the more he realized that every employee here leads a double life. It seems like everyone around me is playing some kind of complicated game. Everyone has their secrets, their skeletons in the closet. But why all this? How can they live hiding such darkness? He wondered, finishing his report in the evening. He did not notice how time flew by, and it was already late enough when he stayed in the office. He looked up and noticed how one of his colleagues, Lisa, walked up to Mr. Davis's office and, looking back, quickly went inside. Mike felt that this was another piece of the puzzle that he had to put together. What is Lisa doing in the boss's office so late? We need to find out. He crept up to the door and tried to hear the conversation. Mr. Davis, I can't go on living like this. This is too hard for me. To which Mr. Davis replied to her rather sharply. Lisa, you knew what you were doing when you agreed. If you step back now, the consequences will be disastrous. Mike decided not to interfere at this point, but he knew that he had to talk to Lisa. The next day, he invited her to lunch. Lisa, I saw you in Mr. Davis's office yesterday. Are you okay? She looked a little nervous. Mike, it's none of your business. You better stay away. Lisa, I just want to help. We're all stuck in this web here, and I know something's wrong. Please tell me. Lisa sighed and, looking at Mike, decided to share her story. Mike, you don't understand what's going on here. Mr. Davis is using us. We all have our weaknesses, and he found a way to manipulate each of us. I feel like I'm living a double life, and I can't break out. But why don't you leave? Why are you staying here? He's threatening me and my family. I can't just leave, Mike. He has too much power. Mike realized that Lisa was not alone in her struggle. He decided that he needed to gather more information and find a way to help his colleagues. In the evening, he stayed at the office again, hoping to find something useful in Mr. Davis's documents. If I can find something that can incriminate him, maybe we can put an end to this nightmare. He quietly made his way into the boss's office and began sorting through the papers on the table. Suddenly, the door opened and Susan entered the room. Mike, what are you doing here? She asked in surprise. Susan, I can't live like this anymore. I want to find a way to stop Mr. Davis and help all of us. Mike, you don't understand what you're getting into. It's not just a job. It's a whole network, and it's almost impossible to break out of it. But we have to try. I can't just watch him destroy people's lives. Okay, I'll help you. But you have to be prepared for the fact that it will be dangerous. They began to look for evidence that could expose Mr. Davis. In the process, Mike and Susan became closer, their union became stronger, and their trust in each other deepened. Susan, I'm glad you're on my side. Together we can do it. Me too, Mike. Let's get this over with once and for all. Mike realized that now he has an ally who is ready to go all the way. Together, they decided to continue their search, despite the dangers and threats. Mike knew that this was just the beginning, and new challenges lay ahead, but he was ready to fight for truth and justice. After Mike and Susan decided to join forces to expose Mr. Davis, they began collecting evidence of his illegal activities. They realized that their every action could have unforeseen consequences, and that their plans could lead to dangerous results. Susan and I have already gathered a lot of information. All that remains is to put it all together and find a way to safely hand it over to the police. But what if Mr. Davis finds out about our investigation? We need to be careful. Mike considered his steps. One evening, Mike and Susan met at a cafe to discuss their next steps. Mike, I found documents confirming Mr. Davis's financial fraud. That's exactly what we need. Great, Susan. But how do we pass this on to the police so that we don't get spotted? I have a detective friend who can help. But we must act quickly and carefully. We can't take any chances. On the evening of the same day, when Mike was returning home, he noticed that an unfamiliar car was following him. He realized that their investigation had attracted attention. Damn, they're already watching me. We need to warn Susan and the detective urgently. Mike quickened his pace and, without going home, went to Susan. He knocked on her door, and she answered, surprised by his late visit. Mike, what happened? I'm being followed. We need to hand over the documents to the detective urgently. We can't wait any longer. Okay, Mike, I will prepare everything necessary. Let's go to him right now. They quickly collected all the documents and left for a meeting with the detective. Mike kept checking to see if anyone was watching them. They arrived at the agreed place, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where Detective Johnson was already waiting for them. Good evening. Did you bring what we were talking about? Yes, here are all the documents. That should be enough to start an investigation. Susan said. Great, we will deal with it immediately. But be careful. If Mr. Davis finds out about your role, he won't just let it go. Mike and Susan handed over the documents and returned to the car. They hoped that their torment was over now, but they realized that everything was just beginning. The next day, a scandal broke out in the office. The police conducted a search and Mr. Davis was arrested. However, Mike and Susan's joy was short-lived. They soon realized that their actions had attracted the attention not only of the police, but also of those behind Mr. Davis. Mike, I think we're being watched. I noticed the same car as yesterday. We are not safe. We need to contact Johnson and find out what to do next. We can't just sit and wait. They contacted Detective Johnson again, who reported that the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Mr. Davis is just the tip of the iceberg. There is a powerful network behind him, and now they know that you are threatening them. You need to leave the city urgently and hide for a while. I'll arrange for your protection. We can't just drop everything and leave. We have families and jobs here. It's a matter of your life. Don't take any chances. I've already set up a safe place. You must leave immediately. Mike and Susan realized that they had no choice. They hurriedly packed up and left the city, heading for the secret hideout organized by the detective. We did the right thing, Susan. But who would have thought that it would lead to such consequences? We knew that it would not be easy. The main thing is for the truth to come out. And we will fight to the end. So began their new life on the run, full of dangers and uncertainty. But Mike and Susan were sure of one thing. They had done everything to stop the evil, and now they would fight for their safety and justice.